Well, it's always a privilege to have the opportunity to introduce your boss. And so I'll try to be nice, Willie. Our final speaker this morning is Dr. Willie May, who was confirmed by the Senate in May 2015 as the 15th Director of the National Institute of Standards and Technology and the Undersecretary of Commerce for Standards and Technology. I believe his congressional confirmation vote was 92-0, which is probably the last time that Congress actually fully agreed on anything. Willie has been at NIST for 45 years and is an internationally recognized analytical chemist with more than 85 publications. Following his appointment as NIST Director, Chemical Engineering News ran a story on him last summer declaring him the government's top chemist. I know from personal experience that we're fortunate at NIST to be led by someone who passionately wants to see the best measurements made to benefit society. Willie has been a strong advocate of NIST efforts to strengthen forensic science, and he serves with Dag Yates as the co-chair of the National Commission on Forensic Science. Please join me in welcoming NIST Director Dr. Willie May.
Thank you, John. You read that almost the way I wrote it, right? Again, first I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me to participate in this session and talk about NIST in general and what we are doing in forensic science, to support forensic science, that is. I think this is the first time a NIST director has had the privilege to address the Academy in a plenary session. My predecessor, Pat Gallagher, was here 3 years ago in a session on jurisprudence to announce the new collaboration that we were establishing with the Department of Justice, that is, the signing of an MOU to support try to engender increased trust, if you will, in forensic results. NIST is a fairly large place, and I think most of you who come only see a small sliver of it, and I won't try to explain it all today. I want you to have lunch. We consider ourselves to be a world-leading scientific organization. We have about 3,400 federal employees, and we have another 3,700 guest scientists who come from all around the world to collaborate with us on problems of mutual interest. That's primarily our laboratory program, which is the heart and soul of the organization. But in addition to that, we have a manufacturing extension partnership that's a nationwide network of 60 manufacturing extension institutes, organizations. There are at least one in every state, so you can see why this would be very popular with the Congress. There are 60 in total, and what we're doing now is recompeting these. They were established in the early 1990s, and we are now recompeting them to try to adjust the funds, the grants, for each state to be congruent with the manufacturing enterprise that it serves. We have a program in performance excellence that sort of develops the metrics for performance excellence, and we manage a presidential award in a number of categories. The most popular these days are health and education, and we're in the process of developing one in cybersecurity at this moment. And finally, we manage the Advanced Manufacturing Program Office. For the last 3 of the last 4 State of the Union addresses, not the last one, the President talked about his vision for having 45 manufacturing innovation institutes around the U.S. and 15 by the end of his administration. Well, so that the total exceeds the sum of its parts, someone has to coordinate this network, and NIST has the responsibility of coordinating this network which is now about 9, 15 hopefully by the end of the administration, and the vision for the long term is 45. Now, of course, there's not the money in the budget for this, so we'll see how we move forward. Well, you see our mission there. I won't read it, but first and foremost, we were established in the early 1900s to provide the national standards for measurement. Now, standards for measurement was a lot more narrow then than now. But even then, we recognized that we couldn't do this by being a bureaucratic standards institute. We really had to have a very deep and broad scientific research program to do that. The other thing I'll note is our non-regulatory nature. I could say, and I do sometimes jokingly, that we can say that we're from the government, we're here to helping people believe us. But the other thing is, by being a non-regulatory agency, it allows us to play the role of a convener in important situations, like convening the OSAC, for example. And that is built on the trust that is engendered by our deep scientific roots. Again, we were established in the early 1900s. We had the responsibility of maintaining custody of the national standards for measurement and comparing those with our counterparts around the world. We still do that as part of a treaty, but the truth of the matter is we aim to be the best in the world at this. For example, in terms of realizing the second, we've recently established a strontium lattice clock with a tick rate accuracy of 1 second in 15 billion years. And I could give other examples like redefining the kilogram based on Planck's constant, but I don't want to bore you anymore with that. So I say that since our inception, in addition to doing those things that some might see as arcane, like 1 second in 15 billion years, when you guys think my watch works fine. Well, there are reasons for that, things like GPS, stamping financial transactions, and things that we take for granted. But in addition to maintaining these rigorous physical and even chemical standards, and now biological, we've recognized from day one that in addition to the more traditional standards that you might think about, that in order to be relevant, we have to use a considerable amount of our resources to address contemporary societal need. So in the early 1900s, one of the first standards we have was one for interoperability for hose couplings to a fire hydrant, because there was a fire in Baltimore and the city burned up because fire engines came from near and far and they couldn't couple their hoses. We were doing things like developing standards for light bulbs. Thomas Edison had invented the light bulb, but it didn't mean you could use it in your homes. So things like that. But if you fast forward to 2016, we're focused on things that are of importance now, like advanced communications. How can we better effectively share spectrum and make sure that the devices that we use do what they should do and not do what they shouldn't do? Advanced manufacturing, advanced materials, bioscience and health, cyber-physical systems, and you can call that the Internet of Things, if you will, cybersecurity, disaster resilience, quantum science, and not last and certainly not least, forensic science. So why did we launch our effort in forensic science? Well, we didn't really launch it that. We've been involved in forensic science since the 1920s. But we began to put more emphasis and focus because of the NAS report that said, in essence, that except for DNA sciences, there is question about the rigor of some of the methods that are used to provide data that's used to determine guilt or innocence. Now, in DNA, it's fairly robust, and we can say to one part and a big number, I won't give you the number because John will tell me I'm wrong, that was Willie May's blood at the crime scene. Now, lucky for me, you can't say that it's my blood, but you can't say how it got there. So then the argument comes to things like chain of custody, temporal, and locational information, but not whether or not that was my blood or not. But we can't speak with such precision in other areas of forensic science, and that's what we're trying to accomplish. Also, that report gave some credit to to the SWIGs at that point, but said that they could be managed in a more coherent manner. So addressing the science and the management of the OSAC, as well as partnering with the Department of Justice in the commission, is sort of the three components of our programs. Now, standards. There are two types of standards that we provide. One is the physical standards, and we have our standard reference materials, and we provide some calibration services. And all of these standard reference materials, there are over 1,300 types of these. Here's one, I think, that John developed before he started wearing ties and suits. It's one of our DNA profiling standards. And in this case, we have a constitutional responsibility to maintain these physical standards, to calibrate measurement systems, or to quality assure the results from measurement systems. So in this case, for the U.S., look at us like we're God. We have the responsibility to be God in this space. But for documentary standards, codes, we don't. These are led by the private sector, organizations like ANSI, ASTM, et cetera, and we provide our technical expertise to support those activities. We don't name them themselves, and we could say some of the standards that are coming out of OSAC are very similar to that. Although we manage the OSACs, we work with the community to develop consensus standards. Now, I said we've been involved in forensics for a long time. Wilma Sauter was one of the nation's first and highly regarded forensic scientists. John Butler, again, and a company are going to give a seminar, at least they give a talk tomorrow afternoon, where they'll tell you all you want to know about Wilma Sauter and more. NIST has a rich and long history of supporting law enforcement and expertise in lots and lots and lots of areas. And I'd say probably more so than any laboratory in the world that doesn't actually analyze, doesn't do crime scene investigations, nor casework. In the NASH report, we have efforts in 5 areas. We have our research program. We have established a forensic center of excellence with our state university and 4 other institutions to help us to quickly grow the new technical muscles that we need to support the OSACs and the commissions. And this $4 million a year is not a grant, it's a cooperative agreement. So we expect them to be a part of our intramural research program. So it's not us giving them money, say go away and do things. We will work integrally with them to try to put more rigor into pattern evidence so it can rival or we'll never be able to say one person in 50 million to a tire marking, at least one party to a tire marking or tool marking or something like that. We want to be able to say with confidence that this tire mark matches this one to one part in whatever with a very robust uncertainty statement. Then we had last year for the first time an international symposium on forensic error measurement. It was very well received, and we plan to make this a series and continue. And then we have the honor of co-chair with Dag Yates, the National Commission on Forensic Sciences, and then the OSAC. So that's sort of our portfolio of activities. We'll be giving a number of talks this year, at least today, this week, at this meeting in our areas of specific focus, that is forensic genetics, ballistics, digital and identification forensics, statistics, toxins, and trace. And you see on the slide where the sessions that they will be in. Back to CSAFE, the partners are our state university, Carnegie Mellon, University of Virginia at Charlottesville, and can't read the other. California Irvine, thank you, John. And you can see what we plan to do there. And last on here, but not least, is also provide a forum to train forensic practitioners, judges, and attorney, and the next generations of statisticians in this forum. Well, the commission is up and running. We've had a number of meetings. We have 4 a year. and we're really beginning to make progress. Here are now the work products that are in place adopted by the Commission. They have not all gone to the Attorney General, but one of the things that has been mandated, and a number of speakers have spoken about it, is the idea of universal accreditation. Then we have the OSACs, which I think many of you are familiar with. We've had 2 meetings this year, so we're busy. One about last month in the Washington area, and I've heard a number of very good meetings at this meeting this week. So there are 34 committees and subcommittees, 700 volunteers working with us in this endeavor, and our efforts have paid off. We've had the first standard adopted and placed in the OSAC registry just last month, and I understand there are a number in the pipeline now, and we have a number of communications mechanisms on what the OSAC is doing, not least of which is a monthly newsletter. And these are just some snapshots from the plenary speakers at the first International Symposium on Forensic Error Management that we had last summer. And as I said, this will be a continuing series, and on our website you have access to all of the presentations that were given at that meeting. Well, I'll close by saying that I think we all recognize that we need to provide more rigor in the science that supports guilt and innocence decisions in our courts. And that future literally is in your hands. But we at NIST are committed to working with the Department of Justice to strengthen this science, but we can't do it alone. It requires the efforts of all in the stakeholder community to provide the improved transparency, rigor, and confidence that we need in the U.S. jurisprudence system. Thank you for your attention.